Welcome to the Scrum Sessions podcast. I am Q here in Dallas.
And I'm Garion, based in Berlin. Welcome back to the Scrum Sessions podcast.
Yes, and this is the first one for 2023. And welcome to the new year and welcome to the podcast.
Happy New Year, everyone.
So, my friend, what should we talk about today?
Well, you talked about capacity planning, that it drives you up the wall because people are doing it in really interesting ways, I have to say. I'm really curious to hear what you have to report on. So let's take that topic.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic, and oh boy, it's one of those topics I get passionate about. One of the many topics I get passionate about, right? I have about 534 pet peeves that I can count. That's one of them, right? But you see, I think people actually complicate it. I think people complicate a lot when they go plan for a sprint. And I'm not going to go into release planning and etc. because I want this to be a separate podcast. There's a lot more to cover this. So let's talk only single team and planning for a sprint, right? And in the past, we talked about backlog refinement and how important it is to do refinement and have refinement really nailed down, because if you do refinement right, your planning is going to be really easy, right? And I tell my teams all the time that. And in the beginning, they don't believe, but then eventually they do. But when I get a team that I didn't coach from the beginning, I just basically parachute in there, knew they don't know me. I'm often surprised how they get to complicate stuff. I had, a while back, one Scrum Master who had this elaborate Excel spreadsheet to calculate capacity. Right? It was down pretty much to the minute. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the person and I said, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Not to mention that oftentimes they spent an hour discussing how they could squeeze another 2 hours of work inside of a sprint, right? I mean, you and I know this stuff's not going to work. Mm. And it's funny how people complicate capacity. Don't you agree with me, or it's just me who's seen that?
I've seen it as well, and I think it's the illusion of control, right? Just because it's manifested there in the Excel sheet, that person thinks it's actually going to happen in the real world, and we know it doesn't.
Yep, it doesn't even come close. And it's funny because capacity should be very simple, right? Mm. Let's assume that nobody's traveling, there's no holidays, there's nothing, right? So I basically tell my teams, okay, you have the backlog refinement. It's all in order, right? Most important to the least important. We went through all this stuff. We split them. We made them small. They're about all the same size and etc. Right? Mm-hmm. So it should be a simple thing. Item number 1, can we do that in the sprint? Yeah, good. Number 2, can we do that in the sprint? Yeah, good. Number 3, can we do that in the sprint? Good. Until we say, hey, I don't think we can do more, right? And then, of course, everybody always overcommits. I used to do that when I was writing code for a living. We always overcommit. So that's where the Scrum Master should be careful that people don't pull more stuff that they can handle. But you, as a team, as part of a team, you have a pretty good idea if something fits or not, especially if they're about the same size, right? Or near the same size. And I always tell my team, just count them. Okay, how many you guys normally do on a sprint? I don't know, 10. Okay, so let's pull 10 of them, right? Assuming we have full capacity and all that stuff. So I don't see the point of spreadsheets and all this complication stuff, but I don't know. How do you teach your teams? How do you coach your teams into doing that?
First of all, I want to just explain something to viewers that for those that are listening, I just picked up a stack of Post-its and started writing some stuff down because some Kaizens came to my mind, right? So I was thinking, okay, maybe we can change this during the podcast. And for all of you Scrum Masters out there, at least probably for all Scrum practitioners, always write down your Kaizens immediately when they come to you, because otherwise you're going to forget about them. So How do I do it? You're going to be surprised that I'm even more relaxed, right? Because you were just going through the process. You start at the top of the backlog, of the product backlog, doing sprint planning, and then you go down, right? And I think you can actually do it without any estimation, and you can do it without any velocity, right? As long as you have an understanding of what's in the product backlog, right? If you have never refined it, of course, you're going to fail. But let's assume velocity and estimations didn't exist, right? What would you do? You would start at the top and you would ask, team, so now that we've refined this, we've talked about this, we have just checked in that nothing has changed and we still have a good understanding of it. Do you think you can do it in the sprint? And for the first story, they're going to say yes, right? Hopefully, because if they can't even do the first story, you're going to have different problems, right? But so then you go to the second one, and at some point of time, they're going to say, this is going to be a little bit tricky, right? And then you got to be very careful. And I always say, stop there immediately, and even don't take that one borderline story in. Just take in as little as is feasible, and then once they're done early, they'll pull in more anyway, right? And then I'm good with that. I don't actually need the velocity and the estimations per se. They're very helpful, and I'm not telling you don't use velocity, don't use the estimations, but I say I could do it without it, right? So if you can do it without it, why do we even have them? Well, because they're super helpful, right? Because if you have a measure of how large is this item going to be that you've decided on before, then this is much more concrete, much more efficient to do the planning instead of like having just this broad feeling, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, we think we can do it. So absolutely have them, but you know, if push comes to shove, you could do it without them. And yeah, let me finish this because you know, like when you started this guy with the crazy Excel sheet, he's coming from the total opposite end where I'm coming from, right? I'm not coming from this extreme where I have like the minutes planned out. I'm coming from, I'm just asking them if they can do it, right? Which is the total other extreme. And then I move a little bit off it because they are super helpful to use. And so for me, this other extreme is really that. It's the other extreme because it's in the end, it's waste. That person is spending a lot of time on an elaborate model, right? Trying to reflect reality when we all know this is not going to work. And if I saw this, I would have the immediate suspicion that that person might have been a classical project manager in the past, right? Where they have this illusion of controlling a VUCA world and trying to put everything into some sheets or plans that we know won't reflect reality after a second. And so I'm coming from the total opposite end, and I'm totally with you. I don't think it makes any sense to put all this work in. It's waste. You start off very simple, use velocity, use estimations as a tool, and then off you go.
Honestly, to tell the truth, I don't even use the word velocity, right? I use the concept of historical data, how much stuff we normally do, right? The reason I don't like to use the word velocity is, well, you know, right? It gets weaponized. It becomes a target, becomes an obsession. And that's not the point. The whole point of historical data, whatever you call it, is to give you an indication of how much stuff you can safely bring in, right? And we know there is always a variability. There's stuff that you don't know, but you have a pretty good idea of that. The moment you weaponize that thing and it becomes a target, oh, it's 20, so we have to do 20, right? Or, oh, we have been doing 20 for 6 months. We have to do 30 now. You know, every time you set those numbers, those are crazy things and they don't work. All they do is they stress people out. And honestly, I'd rather have people pick up less than the historical data and set up a sprint goal with that, right? Figure out what your outcome of doing those things is going to be. And you're probably going to finish early anyway, right? And if you finish early, you can always bring stuff in, right? And that stuff in is going to have additional outcomes. So I think people get a bit too, I don't know what the right word is, but sort of involved in this number dance and etc. And they complicate stuff. I'll tell you something else. Another team I had, they had one person who was gonna get half a day off to do some stuff. I forgot what it was. And they are like, okay, so if one person takes half a day off, we're gonna lose capacity. So how much capacity you're gonna lose? And they start discussing this. They're trying to come up, they were using story points, another thing. Don't let me start on that, right? And they were trying, that's probably 3 points that we're gonna lose. Or no, it's 2. No, it's not 3, it's 2. No, it's 2, it's 3. And they spent, I don't know, more than an hour discussing that. I said, guys, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? It's not even significant. That's a negligible amount of potential loss. In the end, is not even that, right? And I think people get hung up on, hey, we have to stuff every single available minute of the sprint with stuff to do. That's being busy. That's not being productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do like velocity, but I totally de-emphasize it, right? So I want to have it there. I also use the term, but I don't put any weight on it. And I think something similar that you're seeing is that sometimes, Scrum Masters are really nervous and they come and say, oh, the velocity didn't go up or we had a dip. And it's like, I don't care. So first of all, there was probably a reason, right? Maybe it was the soccer world championship that was happening. The moon phase wasn't right. There's always some stuff that influences that. And what I want to see is over time, I want to see an upward trend. I don't care about the fluctuations that are going to be normal. And also, and I know you're going to jump on this, I don't care about the points in the end. I care about the impact that was achieved with the points, right? And Q to Q.
Oh, to my Q, I mean, and I told people thousands of times, listen, I've been a product owner once and a product manager once, right? And I had actually to bring a large product to market, right? If a Scrum team came to me during the sprint review, and some did this, this is our burn down chart, and this is how many story points we did. I looked at them and I said, why are you showing me this stuff? It means absolutely nothing to me. What I want to know is, what did you guys create, and what impact that's going to have to my customer? If that's 50 story points or 500, I couldn't care less. What matters to me is the outcome of what you're delivering. And I think people lose track of this. I'm not interested in story points. So I'm interested in what can I bring in the sprint? And if I complete all those things that I brought to the sprint, what is the outcome for me? That's what I care.
Yeah.
If it's 50 points or 500, I couldn't care less.
So I kind of get a feeling right now that maybe we should give people a little bit more context, because if you think of Shuhaori, we are kind of like on the higher level talking right now. So if you're a Scrum Master, you've just taken your Scrum Master class, right? You're a registered Scrum Master now, and you're just starting off, and you hear us say that, please don't take this meaning, yeah, you don't need to calculate the velocity, you don't need to do estimations, so on. Please do all of that. Do all the basics. What we're saying is the following. Please don't waste your energy on having meaningless discussions for an hour, trying to figure out what half a day difference of one person means. Please don't waste your time on keeping elaborate Excel sheets that don't reflect reality. And what we're saying is that on a more advanced level, there's actually like a little bit more to it, right? But if you're a beginner, if you're at the shoe level, please just follow this along. But as you progress on your journey, you will start to feel some things, right? You will see that, okay, in 2 sprints, you had the same velocity, but one sprint didn't really deliver anything of value. And one sprint, you just had those features that really made the difference in the market, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about, more high level, more product owner view is, of course, we are preferring the second sprint, right? Because as the product owner, I care about impact on the market. Yes, I care about the velocity as well. It's good that the Scrum Master is keeping track of it and everything is going according to plan. But in the end, really in the end, we care about impact, because this is making the difference, and not, let's say, I'm thinking of empty calories, right? Like some velocity points that don't really mean anything.
No, you made good points, right? I mean, I have nothing against the concept of velocity. Like I said, historical data it's important to give us an idea of how well we're going, right? And as a matter of fact, I had a situation where we found a plugin for Azure DevOps to do Monte Carlo simulation, right? And if you're not familiar with Monte Carlo simulation, it's basically a bell-shaped curve. It's a normal curve, right? And you input historical data in there, which can be done automatically, obviously, right? And in using that, it gives you a pretty good approximation how you're going to trend. And I think it's actually much better than any other method because you have the historical data and you have the actual data for that sprint, and you can see how your trending during the sprint is going to affect long term, right? So if you're trending great, okay, good. If you're not trending so well, hey guys, we need to get together, do a retro and figure out what's not working here, right? And any good Scrum Master should be doing that.
Yeah.
But I prefer Monte Carlo simulation to a bunch of other things that people do that are way too complicated, and honestly, don't buy me anything. But again, I'm not against velocity. I use historical data all the time as an indication, right? As a trend, because as a product owner, as a product manager, I also want to have a clue when the whole thing is going to get out of the furnace, and be molded into a product and get out of the door, right? But for my perspective, when I'm on a sprint review, I want to know what people did and how that benefits my customer at the end. That's what I meant. I don't care if it's 50 or 500.
Yeah.
I really don't. I care if it's 50 or 500 from the sense that I'm gonna go on my Monte Carlo simulation there and see how the trends are going. Yeah, I'm not even preoccupied with the numbers. I'm preoccupied with the data they input in there, how that is affecting how we're going to deliver this. But more important to me is, what are we delivering every sprint that brings benefit to my customer?
Yeah, and I think this is a really good point. And so again, talking to the beginner Scrum Masters, if your product owner isn't much more experienced than you, this is actually something to look out for, right? So most likely they're not going to have this keen sense that Q is showing here, right? Like really have that focus on impact. And so this is something you should look out for, right? Get the basics right, have the velocity, just as we said. And then look at what your product owner is doing. Is she actually doing what Q has been just talking about, like really trying to make sure that those story points have a lot of impact, a lot of outcome behind them? Or is she just, prioritizing some stuff for whatever reason and not having that mindset of, inflicting the most damage, right? Because this is what you're seeing right now. We want to have an impact. We don't do Scrum to just, trickle along like a little river and nothing is happening. We want to get something done. And one part of that is you as a Scrum Master and the team driving the stuff forward and getting stuff done. And then the product owner making sure that you're actually working on the most valuable stuff, right? And so have an eye out if your product owner is actually doing that.
And actually, it's a great point. Remember, Scrum Master and Product Owner interlace, they work together. They should be in constant communication. They should understand what's going on. They should be constantly talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a typical situation. You can have a greenhorn Scrum Master and a very experienced Product Owner. You can have a very experienced Scrum Master and a greenhorn Product Owner. You can have both greenhorns and both really experienced people. So communication is key. You learn from each other, right? If a Scrum Master is novice and benefits from having an experienced Product Owner, Scrum Master is going to start realizing that the outcome is very important. Even though we are working on the output, is what the output will bring as an outcome that's very important. If it's the other way around, right? The product owner is not very experienced, right? It's also starting to understand, hey, the Scrum Master is preoccupied with the process, is preoccupied to get things out with quality and etc. Perhaps I should pay more attention to that too, And then they eventually start to see, hey, because of the better quality because of the better efficient, I'm delivering value early to my customer, and that is affecting my outcomes. So there is a lot of benefits into, working together and trying to understand each other. Uh, we always say we should break the silos, right? But I've seen a lot of situations where the Scrum Master and the product owner, not necessarily because they wanted to, but they created a silo of some sort, right? It's like when the Scrum Master say, well, I care about process. The product owner say, I don't care about that stuff, right? But when we have good communication, we get perspectives from both sides of the house, sort of speaking, and we grow better as a team when we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just one thing came to my mind. If you want to use like an Excel sheet, but one that actually makes sense and that's not going overboard, there's one somewhere on the Scrum Inc. site. I don't know if you have to be a registered Scrum Master or product owner to access it, or if everyone can access it. But if you feel the need to have something like that, please use something that's from an official source, and please don't build your own, because that's just waste and you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes in that.
Yeah, and again, I go back to my pet peeve, right? Do not overthink it, right? If your historical data says you can do 20 things a sprint, okay? And when you are doing your planning, you're bringing stuff from the backlog in and etc. Okay, we got to 18. I'm not too sure we can do these other two things. Oh, maybe we can split them, or etc. Don't be obsessed. Just pick up 18 and run with it, right? I mean, I'd rather finish early. So always can bring stuff in.
Exactly.
Right? But do not get obsessive about trying to shoehorn exactly the same amount of things that you do every sprint, because stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter how good you refine some stuff, there is always the stuff that you don't know. Right? And I think we should always consider another two things that's very important. One is, no matter what you say, there's always shoulder taps. And that can be an emergency, can be a production issue, can be somebody in the C-level suite needs something and you guys have to do it right now, no matter what, right? We should always plan to have a buffer, and a buffer to deal with interruptions. And again, that can be based on historical data. Can be something very simple. Hey, every time we have an interruption, how much we lose from what we planned because of that interruption. And if you take that amount of interruptions into account, you have a much more viable backlog that you can say, okay, we normally would do 20 things, but when we get interrupted, we usually do 5 less. Okay, let's plan to do about 15. It's predictable for the product owner. Product owners like to have a certain level of predictability, but we also deal with stuff that may happen. And if nothing happens, grab stuff from the backlog and start doing it, right?
Yeah, and actually, now that you're saying it, I think this is really important to also understand managers, right? So in my experience, few managers, few stakeholders care about this kind of stuff, right? They want to see the impact. And if you plan for, I don't know, let's say 60 points and you only achieved 55 points, but you have a good explanation, you have already an idea of why this happened, right? Why you fell short, and you are just open it in the review, nobody's getting killed. I mean, I've had this many times, and whenever we did it, even in front of very tough managers, everybody was like, okay, cool, it happens. They have a plan, right? At least they have a plan to figure out a plan. And in general, they're delivering stuff. And so no big deal, right? And on the other hand, if you're a manager, and if you find yourself like being very strict with your teams and always saying like, oh, why didn't you hit the 200 points or the 60 points or whatever, please stop that, because you're doing a lot of damage that you might not be aware of, because then they're going to start manipulating those numbers, then they're going to be put on a lot of stress, and you're not really helping. You might be thinking that you're helping, but you're actually causing a lot of damage. Look at what they have accomplished. They have probably done a lot of good stuff, and a couple points here and there don't really matter. It's not that big of a deal. The important thing is to move forward, to get stuff done, to improve over time, and that's it. You don't need to be very picky about, how you only achieved 97% and that means you are failing.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and we always fail. There is always this stuff that we don't anticipate. There's stuff beyond our control, right? I mean, you can have a power failure because, the weather or something like that. We just had bad weather at the end of the year, right? And that means nothing. It means, hey, it's a lesson that we learned. Oh, by the way, perhaps we should plan for power failures, perhaps we should have a generator on backup. I don't know, right?
Exactly.
But every time we, quote unquote, fail, we learn something, right? So as long as we didn't do something very dumb or unprofessional or reckless,
even dumb stuff happens, right?
Yeah, even dumb stuff happens, right? But as long as we don't plan to do something really dumb, right? We should always think about this is an opportunity that we learn something. If nothing else, you learn, hey, we need a contingency from when this thing happens again or something similar happens, right? So we are not as impacted. We can absorb the impact in a reasonable way. Which goes without saying, right? That we should never, ever, ever, because you had your post-it in there, forget to have a Kaizen in the sprint.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be anything huge. Remember, Kaizen is small things that pile up after a while, and they have a big impact, right? But it's important to have a Kaizen. So, hey, you know what, guys? We normally do daily Scrum at 9:30 in the morning, and by that time, we're already here for 2 hours. Why don't we do it early? Let's experiment with that. That's a simple Kaizen. It doesn't need to be anything elaborate. It can be tiny little things that help us get better at what we do. And that should be something we always include in a sprint. And I know product owners, oh man, I want new features, new stuff. But if you don't get your processes and practices better, it's going to impact your delivery of new features, or you're never going to be as efficient as you can be.
Absolutely. All right, man. Any other crazy stories about capacity planning?
Oh, I have a bunch, but honestly, let's leave it there.
Awesome.
I don't want to transform this into a horror movie. Even though I may get some ketchup and spray here so it looks like a horror movie, but honestly, I don't want to go there. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think that's information that a lot of people should in consideration. We don't own the truth. We don't know more than everybody else. We've just been around for a while and we got beaten by multiple things, right? So, guys, I think that's it for today. From Dallas, I am Q, and the last word is always from...
Girion from Germany, signing off. Keep it simple. Don't create any waste in your capacity planning, and then you're going to be good. See you next time. Bye-bye.